Happy Sunday morning, everyone. It's a beautiful day in my neighborhood, and I hope it is as well in yours. Now, once again, I'm outside. Sound like somebody's drag racing at the moment. I live in a residential neighborhood, so I'm not sure why people are flying up and down the main street. That's about half a block away from me. But anyway, we're going to deal with it. So today I'm here to discuss part one of Iyanla Fix My Life, House of Healing, Fix a Black Man's Heart. And so let me say off the bat that I love black men. So you're not going to hear me like really criticizing or putting them down. And if I do say something about them, it's because they deserved it. I think black men have it hard here in America. They have endured so much from slavery until now today, where we have, all of these feminists and black women movement, where they're really just belittling the black man and stripping him of all his value. And we see so much in the forefront about the negative things that black guys do, but I can assure you that I am living proof of someone who has experienced many, 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 many positive black men in my life. My maternal grandmother had 13 kids, have I think seven uncles, and all of them wonderful, wonderful men who were positive contributors to the community. I think I have, let's see, my uncle Ralph, who's a bishop in the retired elder in the AME church, my uncle Wes, my uncle Charles, and my uncle Lucian, who is 93 years old. Isn't that amazing? So, nephew, wonderful nephews. I have three nephews. Nope, let me take that back. I have five nephews. Two I don't get to interact with that much because they live out of state, but five strong, empowering black men, in their 30s and 40s, family men, just positive role models, cousins, just so many black men that I have been blessed to know. So I can counter when people are putting black men down. So let's go ahead and get started. So I want to introduce the men that are in the house. There are six men, and I'm going to read this real quick, hopefully, because I got a feeling that this video is going to be kind of long. So the men are Clarence, who's 38, and he's been in and out of jail since the age of 17. And his struggle in life is that laying the groundwork for a better life. And his quote for the show was, "Being incarcerated became like a repetitive cycle. I used to think that everything and everyone was against me as a black man, and it did create a lot of anger inside of me." Then we have Michael, who's 44, and you guys probably know Michael. He was the bass singer in the group Boys to Men, and his struggle is abandonment. And his quote was, "If I had to sum up what I got from my brothers in Boys to Men, I would have to say betrayal, a broken bond. I mean, at this point, we don't even talk to each other." And I think that's really sad because I think we all love Boys to Men. I know that was, one of the groups when I was growing up, or I might have been an adult, but like in my early 20s when Boys to Men was really hot on the scene. So I hate to see that those guys. And then I also, him being on the show is going to tell us a lot, because I know I was one of those people that every time I see them perform, it's just the three guys, and I'm always like, "Well, then, where's Mike?" So we find out what happened to Mike in this show that Iyanla is doing. Okay, next we have Kevin. Kevin is 30 years old. He's a father of two, singer-songwriter, and he actually wrote a couple of songs for Chris Brown. And he dated Eva Marcel. You guys remember Eva? She won America's Next Top Model, and so they have a daughter together. And he's not allowed to even say, because of the issues they've had in their relationship, and he's been sued, and Eva has full custody, and it's another one of those cases. And I think this happened on one of the Basketball Wives series, where I think, I can't think of the guy's name, but he used to play for the Orlando Magic, and he had the daughter from, was it Drea? And he, Dwight Howard, whoever he had the daughter from that was on basketball wives, and she couldn't say his name on the show. Well, Kevin is in that same situation where he's not even allowed to let Eva's name come out of his mouth, and I thought that was crazy. So Kevin's quote was, "Violence is kind of normal for me because probably before middle school, I had probably 40 fights. One day I got suspended. I walked home and I was like, Dad, I got in a fight. He was fixing to whoop me. And he said, Well, did you win? I was like, Yeah. And he was like, Good job. So he, kind of feels like his violent behavior is a trained behavior. And because he was disciplined for that as a child, he grew up thinking that it was okay. And then we have Michelangelo, who's 46, and he's a musician. He was previously on the House of Healing, The Myth of the Angry Black Woman, and his struggle is filling out a place in his own skin and culture. And his quote was, "I am affected by how people think about me." We have Tyrone, who is 29, and he's a habitual cheater, and he was previously on the House of Healing, The Myth of the Angry Black Woman also. And his struggle is overcoming immature, destructive patterns. And his quote was, being a player, being that dude, being a tough guy, those days are over. Now I need some healing. I want to have kids. I want to have a family. People mess up. And I thought it was great, since they say he was a habitual cheater, I think it's great that he doesn't have kids, spread all over the country that he's not taking care of. So that's a positive for Tyrone. And then last we have Terrence, and Terrence is 39, and he is the estranged father of Lyra Galore, who, if you recall, she was one of the women in the Angry Black Woman series. And she's also the ex-fiance of Rick Ross. And his struggle is mending his broken relationship with his daughter, and we'll learn as we go through the show that he is just asphyxiated on the fact that him and Lyra do not have a good relationship, but he doesn't want to bear any of the blame. He's putting everything on Lyra, who's like 22 years old. It's all her fault, but we'll learn more about that as the show goes on. And so his quote was, "My current relationship with my daughter right now, if I have to be honest, is pretty much non-existent." Although Terrence thinks that if he can just talk to Lyra and get her to see his side of things, that everything would be okay. But it's obvious that he didn't watch the Angry Black Wives series earlier in the series, because during one of the role play scenes, I think the Michelangelo guy, he sat in for him, and Lyra gave a really powerful monologue where she said, and I'm going to read this because I don't want to mess it up because it was really good. Lyra said, "I forgive you for not being a father. I forgive you for leaving me when I needed you the most. I forgive you for robbing me of my innocence. I forgive you for abandoning me." And she starts crying, and she's saying, like, "I forgive you for not protecting me. I forgive you for not letting me be a daddy's girl," which I thought was, whoa, because I'm a daddy's girl, so I know how important that is to women. "And I forgive you for not letting me love you. I forgive you for not giving me love. I forgive you for playing a daddy to other people's children," which is really common because guys will abandon their own children and then be the perfect father for children of women, that they meet along the way. And she says, "I forgive you for forgetting about me." And Lyra also said that her dad lived only like two light stops away, which is probably like 2 or 3 city blocks. And he wouldn't even come visit her because, even though they were that close, but here he is on the show saying that, she's the reason that they can't have a good father-daughter relationship. So go figure. So as everybody is gathered in the room and Iyanla, sitting down talking to them, laying the ground rules, she shares with them that she watched her father suffer a fatal disease of inadequacy and unworthiness before taking his own life. And I was like, oh my God, what must that be like? Growing up knowing that your father committed suicide. I can't even imagine the toll that takes on your life over time. And then she also talks about watching her brother suffer from the age of 16 because he was not only a drug addict but an alcoholic as well. Iyanla had a lot of catchy phrases and inspirational messages that she provided to the men throughout the show. So I wrote a few of them down, and they were, "You can't master your life until you master your mind and your authenticity. powerful. You can't heal what you can't acknowledge. First step to recovery. Dishonesty does not mean you're a liar. A lie is a lie, but when you're dishonest to people, you're leading them to believe one thing when you totally have intentions of doing something else. And a lot of people spend their lives being dishonest because they can't be honest with themselves. So, how are they going to be honest with you? And what's going on in your young mind manifests later on in your older life. And a lot of people can't move forward in their 30s and 40s because they never dealt with they experienced in their youth and in their early 20s. You can't give or be committed to anything until you're able to give and commit to your own self. And then she had Devon Franklin, who is the husband of actress Megan Good, and he was on there. And as she was introducing him, she said that there are places in a man's healing that only another man can lead him to, and that was her reason for bringing Devon onto the show. And let's talk about Devon for a second because that was about how long he was on the show. And I'm hoping that behind the scenes he spent a lot more time with the guys than he did on the actual airing that we saw, because otherwise he really came off as unimportant in the process, and that he was only there to promote the book. Him and Megan, they have a book out that they just released, and they've been promoting it. So I kind of felt like that was the only purpose of him being on the show. But he did tell the guys that, it's important to be honest about who you are. And he talked about how when he was in the church and he was living a double life, he was doing one thing, when he was in front of the church people, but he was living a totally different private life. And he was telling the guys that what you do in private matters, because if your inner circle is full of men with no character, then what type of man will you ultimately turn out to be? So it's important that we surround ourselves with people who are where we're aspiring to get to. So I thought that was good. But other than that, Devon didn't have much else to say. So like Iyanla did with the House of Healing Angry Black Women series, where she had them wear the T-shirts, and then she put the labels on the front of the T-shirts of where they were, at that moment in their life. And so some of the labels that she gave the guys were player, stud, nice guy, thug, dangerous, and lost. And then Iyanla called the program that they were going to participate in CIA, which stands for Character, Integrity, and Accountability. So there was a scene where they performed what Iyanla called an ancient African ritual, and it was called the Blessing of the Head. And I think she either had some oil or some water. So basically, they took it and they was like, they went this away and said something, and then they came back up, and then they went this away. So sort of creating a cross on top of the head. And then the next part where they were blessing their vision, and so they did something where they went this way, and I can't remember where the other way went to, but I thought it was interesting. And I know when I was doing it, as she was doing it with the guys on the show, I kind of felt some pressure release when I did it that way. So maybe it does work. As the show I am tongue tied today. Okay, as the show progresses, Mike Bass from Boys to Men, he reveals that he has multiple sclerosis and that he began feeling the symptoms of the disease when he was like 22 years old. And then I wasn't clear on whether or not he's actually told the members of the group what his diagnosis was. I think when they put him out of the group, or he ended up leaving the group, it was because he was being it was because he was displaying a lot of anger. And I can imagine being 22 years old and you're in like one of the hottest bands in the country, and all of a sudden that's being taken away from you, because he said that whatever the early symptoms was, that the doctor told him, if he kept dancing and moving around, that something could happen in his bike and he would be permanently disabled. And so he didn't know how to tell the guys that, so he started exhibiting anger and depression, and that drove them away. And I think that I'm understanding that correctly. So they either don't know that he has MS, or it was later on after everything fell apart that they learned that he had MS. But at the end of the day, he felt that they abandoned him, and that as much as he loved them and thought of them as family, that they weren't there when he needed them the most. they weren't there when he needed them the most. So then Iyanla had the guys outside and they were participating in this exercise, and it was called the electrical fence. And basically what they did was, oh, let me start by saying it was not a real electrical fence. It was a fence that was created of like some red wire or red rope or something, but it wasn't charged, because if it was, they'd been dead, because of course at the beginning they couldn't get it right. But anyway, the rule of the game was that they were all standing on one side of the fence, and the goal was to get everybody to the other side without touching the fence. And so, like I said, they couldn't get it together in the beginning. They were arguing and fighting, and the one guy, the Michelangelo guy, I think it was, he was just really in bitch ass mode, because he was whining about he doesn't like physical activity. He can't do it. He didn't want them trying to pick him up. He didn't want to pick anybody else up. You know, he was like, don't touch me, leave me alone. I mean, he was at the point where he wanted to fight the guys because they were trying to, you know, get him to calm down and be a part of the exercise. So when they finally got him to come to his senses, then they were able to manage to get everybody across the fence. And then, you know, we had the hoorah moment, you know, where they were proud of themselves for being able to do it. And you know, I thought that for the most part getting everybody across the fence was easy, but then when they got down to the last guy, I was sitting there like, okay, so they kind of like pretty much lifted everybody else up and handed them to the guys that were on the other side. So they kind of like had to throw their body, you know, to make sure they didn't touch the fence. But then I was like, okay, how that last guy is going to get over? But they did manage to maneuver that, and so I was proud of them for being able to work that out. So beyond that group exercise, the remainder of the show was pretty much focused on Terrence, who was just angry, mad, you know, doesn't want to listen. You know, he's his own worst enemy, just, you know, has his arms folded, you know, across his chest, which means that you're not open to learning anything. And so he was like that pretty much all of the show. I kind of put Terrence in the same category as I put Alana. You know, if you guys remember, she was the one in the Angry Black Wives series where she just didn't want to learn, didn't want to try. And so that's Terrence on this first episode, where he's fighting against everybody. He's fighting against Iyanla, and he just doesn't want to move from his position that he's a great dad and that the world is against him. And exhausting, which is why, you know, it was hard for me to finish that Angry Woman series, because it's like, come on, people, you know, you're grown, be accountable for your actions and keep it moving. So one of the house rules was that they would only have limited time to be on the phone. You know, they couldn't walk around with their cell phones and just be talking on the phone all day. So everyone seemed okay with the fact that they, you know, would only have certain times that they could talk on the phone, except for Terrence, because Terrence, we learned, is very attached to his wife, and him being in that house, he said, was the longest time he had ever been away from her. And I thought that was scary, because they obviously have some codependency issues going on in their marriage. So we eventually see Terrence. He gets on the phone with the wife, and as that conversation is going on, we kind of learn what part of Terrence's issues are, because he can't think without his wife. And she appears to be very domineering and disrespectful. You know, she's cursing throughout the phone call, you know, using the F word. And she's telling him basically, I think she thinks that Lyra, you know, his desire to have a better relationship with Lyra is what's causing all these problems. And, you know, she'll be glad when the show is over, and she'll deal with him when he gets home. And she's just, you know, sick of all this effing stuff that's going on. And him being in that effing house is, you know, is bothering her. And so, yeah, he had some issues, and then he got out of jail and got with a woman that's giving him even more issues. So Iyanla plans a private sit down with Terrence to kind of talk to him and, you know, get him back into the loop. And remember in the women's house of healing, where she told them about, you know, there was going to come a time, you know, when they weren't going to like her. So she gave the guys that same speech. So when she gets in with Terrence, she reminds him of when she says that, and Terrence is like, yeah, I remember you said that. And so she says, okay, well, your moment is now. And I was like, okay, y'all, you finna get in it with him. And so, you know, she's talking to him about being dishonest, and that's where the whole, when I told you about the quote earlier, where she says, you know, being dishonest doesn't make you a liar. And so she's explaining to him, because he became very defensive and was like, you're not going to call me a liar. I'm not a liar. And so she's telling him, being dishonest doesn't make you a liar. Being dishonest is when you're doing things to deceive other people. And so she talks to him about, he had made a commitment to the guys that he was going to stay in the program until the end. And he says, well, actually I didn't. And if you go back and review the film, you'll see that when everybody else was saying, yeah, they'll do it, I didn't open my mouth. And then, of course, the image goes to when they were having that meeting. And, he was sitting there with his arms folded, looking mad, and he really didn't agree to stay in the house. But then Iyanla pointed out to him, but that's what being dishonest is about, because if you didn't, want to stay in the house, you should have spoken up and said, well, I can't make that commitment right now. But instead you sat there quietly, leading everybody to believe that you were going to stay to the end. So as they continue to talk, of course, like I've been saying all along, he thinks that Lyra is the problem and that he's not the problem. And so Iyanla strikes a chord when she tells him that he's the reason that Lyra has had 2 abortions. I think she said that she had an abortion when she was 14 and she had another one when she was 21. And then Iyanla recites a quote, I think she said, that Chris Rock had made about women becoming strippers. And so she tells him that he's the reason that Lyra was a stripper, and that she was up on the pole. It was because something she was missing from their relationship. So as Iyanla, is trying to explain to him the heart of a woman, and that, men see things differently, and that women want different things from their relationships with their father, and how pivotal that is, into who they ultimately become. As he's going on, saying that's foolish and you're talking crazy, Iyanla has the producers bring her a cell phone, and on the cell phone, his wife has called and left a message, and on the message, she's pretty much blaming Lyra for all the problems that he's having, and Lyra is the reason that he's in the house. And I'm thinking to myself, if she's calling the show, making those kind of comments, and then we heard her talking to him on the phone where she was cursing and carrying on, can you even imagine what it must be like in that house? And if all of his pain is caused by his broken relationship with his daughter, can you imagine what it does to his psyche to have his wife, I think he said they've been married for 10 years, to have her just sitting in the house and just telling him that Lyra is the problem, Lyra is the problem. And it kind of makes me think that maybe the wife is jealous of Lyra, or jealous of the fact that he loves another woman probably more than he loves her. And so I'm thinking, like, until he deals with that wife issue, there's probably nothing that Iyanla or anybody else can help him with. After Iyanla and Terrence finish talking, he goes out, and the guys are like out on this on that huge balcony that's in the house, and they're talking. And so he's telling them about what Iyanla was saying and how she's crazy, and he's not listening to her. And so I think it was the Tyrone guy who was in the other house, and so he's telling him, listen to Iyanla, she knows what she's talking about. And so he's repeating some of the things that Lyra had said, in her testimonials on the other show. And so then the guy, Kevin, I think it was the one who was angry all the time. So then Kevin basically tells him, he's being a bitch and he's acting like a girl, and he shouldn't be repeating what Lyra said at the house. And, he's gossiping and carrying on. So they're trying to explain to him, no, it's not gossiping. He's trying to show him that, these are things that your daughter is saying and you should listen to that. And so they get into a big argument, and then Terrence, he's basically telling Tyrone, you don't know me, you don't know where I'm from. So, all this male testosterone is going on, and, they talking about their hood and who from South Central, and, all that nonsense. So Terrence ends up walking away, and then when Kevin becomes overly aggressive, then Tyrone walks away. And so that, they finally kind of settle down with that. But after that interaction, Iyanla decides to have a meeting with Kevin because she sees that he's on the verge of exploding. So when Iyanla gets Kevin into the room and she's talking to him, and, he's like, well, I'm not dangerous. I'm not all these things that black women or black people say about black men. He's like, I'm a protector and all, and, I'm powerful and I'm a king and all this stuff. And Iyanla was like, but you've had both of your baby's mothers file restraining orders against you because you were violent towards them. So then he kind of like explained it away like it was no big deal. And I'm thinking, dude, if a woman gets to the point where she doesn't want to see you, you can't utter her name, then you have a serious issue and you are violent. And then we already know you was hanging out with Chris Brown, so that's probably why you two clicked, because both of y'all crazy. But anyway, he kind of settles down and starts listening to Iyanla, and then we learn about his father and how his father was. I think on the one hand, he had a good father, but on the other hand, the father may have been a little overbearing, and took things to the extreme, or maybe Kevin was just really sensitive and he didn't really know how to express himself, so he kind of like cowered down, and that's where all of his violence came from. Getting whoopings as a child, and his dad just wanting him to do better, and he said that he didn't feel that he was able to be himself because he was trying so hard to be who in his mind he thought his father wanted him to be. So that was good that he was willing to listen, unlike Terrence, who didn't want to hear anything that Iyanla had to say. To him, Kevin was open to listening, and I think there even was a moment where he broke down and started crying, and Iyanla was teaching him some breathing techniques to kind of calm his spirit down. So I liked their interaction and the fact that he was willing to listen. It's day 3, and then Terrence comes up to Iyanla and tells Iyanla that he spoke to Lyra, and that Lyra is willing to sit down and talk with him. So he think he's learned all he needed to learn in the house. And so Iyanla was like, but this isn't about Lyra. This is about you, and learning how to deal with life and stuff. And so he still has it in his mind that if he can just fix his relationship with Lyra, that everything will be okay. But we know that that's not the case. And so as Iyanla is talking to him, and she's trying to explain to him that, Lyra isn't the problem, but she feels that God used Lyra to get him to the house so that he can receive the healing that he needs. And so he's kind of like, he's saying he doesn't believe that that's the case, and he doesn't believe that God is working in his favor like that. And so, Iyanla's like, well, God is the Alpha and the Omega. And then she quotes Proverbs 3, I think it's verses 5 and 6. So as she's doing this, he's sort of like mimicking her as though to say, I know all this, I know scripture, I know the Bible, you're not telling me anything that I don't already know. It was like no matter what Iyanla said, he had a comeback for it. So that lets us know that he really isn't listening to her. And one thing I forgot to mention, Terrence did reveal to Iyanla that he's partially blind, and I guess the glasses that he wears kind of compensate so people don't know that he's blind. I think it's in one eye. So no matter what Iyanla says, it doesn't make a difference. So she tells him that he has to go into the house and explain to the other guys that he's leaving and his reason for doing so. So when he's back in the house, of course the guys are begging him to stay and telling him, he's giving up too soon. And so as they're having this interaction, Iyanla made some kind of comment that, him wanting to give up and leave, and the things he's saying to the guy is just jailhouse, it's his jailhouse intellect. And so, he said, well, that's one of the reasons I'm leaving, is because you're so condescending and you're not listening to anything that I have to say. He tells her, you're being really condescending and you're not really listening to anything I have to say. So he turns and he, storms out the house. And I'm kind of happy he's gone, but we know he's probably really not gone. We see in the clip from part 2 that he does decide to remain in the house, maybe temporarily, but he doesn't leave at that moment. But I'm kind of like, you're bringing the rest of the house down, and you're obviously don't want help, and until you want the help, you're just frustrating everybody else. So that was it for part 1 of Iyanla's House of Healing, Fix a Black Man's Heart. But before I go, I just want to say that I would be interested in knowing if any of the guys, aside from Kevin, actually grew up with their fathers in the house. Because I think that's really telling whether or not a guy had a male role model, particularly his father growing up, whether the mom and dad were together. Like, was the father a active player in the man's life? Because a lot of the behaviors that I'm seeing exhibited on this show, they kind of make me think that maybe most of these guys were raised in single mother homes where they didn't have a lot of interaction with male role models. So that's it, folks. I just want to remind you guys that when I was trying to do the Angry Woman series, I only got around to part one because that episode was just so emotionally draining that I couldn't even get vested in the rest of the episodes, so I didn't even bother to watch them, let alone review them. But I'm going to try and stick in there for the brothers and do all three parts of this series. So until next time, don't forget to leave your comments and please subscribe to the channel. I'm trying to get to 100 subscribers so I can add my YouTube channel to my branding, which will be like youtube.com/ Tracy L. Darity, but I'm not allowed to do that until I have 100 subscribers. So I hope you guys will support me in that effort. And until next week when I do part two, peace, love, have a blessed day, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.